was a werewolf. My soul was filled with crystalline lavender ribbons of rain sand, ridding my heart of mortal fright.
Hey guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Hey, what's up if you're new? So, as you can tell by the title of this video today, we are going to be talking about something kind of personal to me, and I just kind of want to put a disclaimer out there before I start listing off the reasons why I decided to quit smoking weed after 10 years of smoking it. So this is just going to be based off of my personal experience, and I know that I spoke about in a previous video, I am channeling something to you, I'm communicating with you, and by you watching this video, I'm leaving an impression on you. I'm simply just telling you what I have experienced throughout my life with smoking weed. And everyone is affected by weed differently. So we all have our own tastes, we all have our own preferences. My hope is that you watch this video and you kind of gain some insight as to how it affected my life. Yeah, so without further ado, I'm gonna try to make this video, I always say this, I'm gonna try to make this video as efficient as possible and just get straight to the point. So I guess I'm gonna kind of start with the beginning of when I started smoking weed and how it affected me and how it has affected me today or now. When I first chose to smoke weed, I would probably say I started smoking weed around the age of 14 or 15. And at first, I really liked it. It made me giggly. I was always euphoric. I always had a good time. It was just something to do with my friends. And I wasn't much of a drinker around the age of 14 or 15, and as life progressed, I still am not much of a drinker, but yeah, I liked smoking weed more than I did drinking, so that was my thing. I always liked to just smoke weed with my friends, hang out and laugh and have a good time. But yeah, that's how I felt when I first started smoking weed. It would give me a giggly feeling. I didn't think anything of it. It never gave me any negative feelings when I first started smoking, so I just continued to do it. And as time progressed, and also, side note, if you guys can hear lawnmowers in the background or just anything out of the ordinary, I live in a really noisy neighborhood and there's just nothing I can do about it, so we gotta roll with the punches here. Anywho, back to what I was saying. So I would pretty much say throughout high school I was smoking weed recreationally, and I was doing it also with my friends, and it was like a social thing that we did. I didn't really associate any negative effects with smoking weed at the time I started smoking it, and it never occurred to me like, oh, am I ever gonna quit smoking weed? Am I ever like, you know, this is a bad thing. It never crossed my mind. I just thought it was something that I was always going to do because smoking weed didn't affect me negatively and it brought me great feelings in the beginning. So fast forward, I'm old enough to live on my own and I can finally smoke weed in my apartment. I can have friends come over and we could smoke together, and that was something that I did all the time with my friends. And again, then I didn't really feel like I needed weed. It was just something that I did recreationally. During that time, I guess this was around college, during that time, smoking weed didn't give me the same effect as it did whenever I was in high school. Remember, in high school I was super giggly, all the time having fun, but now in college I just felt like it was something that put me on another state of mind. It put me on another level. I wasn't giggly all the time. I felt more like I was in a haze or almost kind of numb to what I was actually experiencing. I guess you could say it was, I guess if I could compare it to anything, it would probably be like I was on a higher vibration, but now that I look back on it, it was a lower vibration that I was confusing for a higher vibration. But anyway, that's besides the point. I felt like I was on a higher state of mind because of what the drug or what weed was making me feel and think. So after I graduated from college, I decided to move to California. In California, smoking weed is legal here. It hasn't always been legal in the state of California, but it was one of those things where they weren't very strict on marijuana, because everyone had in their minds that it was eventually going to be legal. Whenever I moved to California, I had an easier access to weed, which increased how much I started smoking. Whenever I moved to California, I didn't have the same group of friends. I had to make new friends, but I still liked smoking weed. Pretty much everyone, it seems like, in California that I have run into smokes weed socially. But as time progressed in my time in California, I started to wonder, am I ever gonna quit smoking weed? What's the point of me smoking weed? There's no point of me smoking weed. It wasn't giving me the same euphoric feeling. I felt like I wasn't necessarily like, for some people, they feel like they need to smoke weed for a certain amount of reasons, either to calm their anxiety, to reduce stress, to either suppress or stimulate their appetite, or whatever the case it may be, that somebody is feeling like they need weed. I didn't need any. I didn't feel the need to smoke weed. I was just smoking it because I guess I wanted to have a good time recreationally, but I wanted to have a good time all the time, it seemed like. So I would just, you know, smoke weed throughout the day, but I definitely wasn't ever one of those people that would just wake up and start smoking. I actually hated that aspect of smoking weed, and when people wanted to do that, I'd be like, no, I can't smoke weed until I've gotten like ready for the day. I can't smoke weed until it's time for me to just like chill, you know what I mean? So during this time in California, I was smoking weed every single day. And in Texas, I was not smoking weed every single day. I feel like I would buy weed maybe like once a month when I lived in Texas, but when I moved to California, that amount of weed that I would buy increased, and the amount of times I would buy it increased because I had more access to it. So I started to wonder, am I ever gonna quit smoking weed? And there were points, even whenever I lived in Texas, I would take what it's called a tolerance break, because I'd be like, oh, I'm smoking too much, and I wasn't really getting anything done. And on top of that, whenever I would smoke, it would take more weed for me to feel like I was at a level of highness that I wanted to be. But I would always like take tolerance breaks here and there. Sometimes it would be for like 3 weeks, sometimes it would be for a month, sometimes it would be for 6 months. But I would always test myself and see like, okay, I'm just gonna stop smoking weed. And every single time that I stopped smoking weed for a certain amount of time, I saw amazing benefits after not smoking weed for so long. So I felt eventually that I was going to quit. It was just a matter of when I was going to do it. So I guess now that we've kind of gone through my journey in relationships when it comes to smoking weed, I'm going to start going through the bullet points that I have on my phone. One of the biggest things I noticed about me smoking weed for 10 years basically was my memory. I have always felt like I had a really strong sense of memory. I could remember things through smell. I could remember things through dates. I could remember things through colors. And as time progressed, I felt like I was losing my short-term memory, which is kind of weird because you kind of brush it off at the fact that you can't remember things. Like for instance, I couldn't even remember what I wore the previous day because I had smoked so much weed that I felt like maybe my brain had been fried or something, or I knew that the information was in my brain, but it was so hard for me to actually remember what I had worn the previous day or where I put an old receipt or something. And that's stuff that you just are like, oh, it's whatever, it's just me being silly. But no, over the course of time, my memory significantly changed, and I started to realize like I need to work on my memory because I'm losing my short-term memory. And I don't know if that's because I've been smoking weed or if it's because I'm just getting old or what the case may be, but I can guarantee you once I stopped smoking weed, every single tolerance break that I took, my memory got stronger. Almost within a week of me not smoking weed, I would feel like my brain was getting smarter. So memory loss is one of the biggest things for me as to why I wanted to stop smoking weed. And apparently, I'm gonna talk about this video later. I watched a video on how marijuana affects the brain over time. If you start early, let's say you start at a young age like I did, the worse your memory gets. So be very cautious of if you are gonna be smoking weed long term, think about how it's already affecting your memory, or if it may be affecting your memory now. Another reason why I feel like I wanted to stop smoking weed is I don't think I was necessarily depending on weed. I wasn't codependent on weed, but if I smoked weed, I felt as if I was avoiding things, avoiding my feelings. I could use smoking weed as kind of like a numbing tool, because once I got high, I didn't really care that much about most things. I would just let them go by. And some people may say, oh, well, that's a good thing, you know, like I don't want to care about most things. But if you're using something as a crutch in order to avoid your reality, that kind of seems like it's an issue. Well, it was an issue for me. I always want to be the strongest person I can be, and if I can't even face my own feelings, something is wrong with that. Going further into the whole like avoiding feelings thing whenever you're smoking, I am a highly passionate person. I guess you could say I'm very sensitive when it comes to emotions, when it comes to just feelings in general. And I felt like with weed, I started to slowly but surely lose my passion and fire and sense and feelings for things because I was constantly numbing myself by smoking weed. And whenever you are, I guess, a creative person or you're an artist, somebody that thrives off of emotion, passion, feeling, or senses, and you start to lose that, you also start to feel lost. You feel like you don't have a sense of yourself. And I didn't really think weed was the cause of me losing my inspiration or losing my passion or losing my senses, but at the end of the day, I think the stimulant that was numbing me, that made me not care about things, was actually the reason why I stopped feeling as much as I did. And now that I don't smoke weed, I feel like I'm back to my good old passionate and caring self. So that's something that I feel was a huge reason as to why I quit smoking weed. Another reason is I felt slow. And I don't know, like you see those like stereotypes of stoners or smokers. They've got the red eyes, they usually smell, their clothes are gross, they look like they're moving kind of slow, and they're just, you know, doing their thing. And I always used to hate that stereotype whenever I was smoking weed all the time. I was like, I am not like that. And to be honest with you, whenever I was high, I absolutely hated when people knew that I was high. So I'd always constantly use like Visine to hide the fact that my eyes were red. I'd always make sure that I had like lotion or perfume on, because I didn't want people to know that I was stoned. I didn't want people to perceive me differently because I was stoned. But yeah, I just felt slower all the time and not really all there. I remember one time I went to the nail salon super stoned and I hated the experience. Usually going to the nail salon is something that I enjoy doing, but whenever I went to the nail salon high, I just hated it. It wasn't that it was giving me anxiety, it was just like, this is not fun to be high when everyone else around me is sober. They're conscious of their reality, they're aware of their reality. So I didn't like not having mental clarity, and I also didn't like the feeling of being slow. Oh yeah, the next reason is the next reason probably should have been the first couple of reasons, but I'm more of a very feeling and sensual kind of person. But the next reason is it's a waste of money. It's a hole in your pocket. Well, that's how I felt about it. On average, I was spending around $300 a month on weed, sometimes even more than that. So if you calculate that up, that's $3,600 a year on weed. That's like a down payment on a car. That's enough money to open a new business. That's a lot of money to be spending on just having a good time. And I never realized how much I was investing into smoking weed. And now that I look back on it, I'm in shock that I would spend that much money on something that wasn't necessarily always making me feel good. And it was something that, I don't know, I just was doing socially, but I didn't have to do it. I didn't feel the need to do it. So for me, I just wasted so much money, but but you live and you learn, you know? So another reason as to why I quit smoking weed is It affects people differently, as I've said before, and for me, like going back to that stereotype I just told you guys about, stoners are usually known for smelling, having red eyes, having like dirty hair, stuff like that. And one thing that I feel affected me the most about smoking weed was the actual smoke itself. The smoke gets in your face and into your skin, so you are literally surrounding yourself, your pores are being opened, and the smoke is going onto your face. And on top of that, depending on what you smoke out of, a blunt, like a cigarillo that has nicotine in it, or a joint, you are inhaling chemicals. And regardless of how you feel about that, for me personally, I feel like the smoke affected my skin, but it didn't give me acne. I felt like the smoke aged me, if that makes any sense. I know you're probably thinking like, okay, this is not a cigarette, how did it age you? But every single time that I would stop smoking weed, my skin began to look more youthful. And this is also kind of another funny thing, is I noticed that whenever I smoked weed, my face would be more hairy. I know, that's kind of weird. That's probably a really weird thing to say, but I felt like I grew a lot of hair on my face whenever I was smoking weed. I don't know if it has to do with the smoke. I don't know if it has anything to do with it being a plant. I don't know what it was, but all I know is that whenever I was smoking weed a lot, there was a lot of hair that grew on my face, and I didn't like that. But whenever I would stop smoking weed, I noticed a slowing down or no hair growth on my face at all. So then there's like the obvious things. I had more energy, and I wasn't constantly relying on tea or coffee or, you know, some kind of stimulant to wake me up because I was smoking, and I needed to combat the slowness with weed. So having energy all the time has allowed me to do the things that I want to get done, and I feel as if I wasn't as productive with my time that I could have been while smoking weed. It's just crazy because I was one of those people that was like, weed doesn't affect my life, weed doesn't slow me down, weed helps me, weed does this for me. But in reality, weed didn't do anything for me except waste my time and money. And now that I don't smoke weed, I feel like, this is gonna be kind of weird, but I feel like I'm a teenager all over again, and I have my senses back, I have my mental clarity back, I have my imagination back, and I'm in control of my mind and body and spirit way more than I have been in the past 10 years. I really feel like not smoking weed is how you could raise your self-consciousness and get more in touch with your spirituality, because whenever you are stimulating your brain, you're not at your highest level of consciousness, and drugs alter your mind. I'm not against people who smoke weed. I personally, if I ever do something with THC in it again, it'll probably be consumed through an edible or a tea, because I just, like I said earlier, I don't like how the smoke affects your lungs. I don't like how the smoke affects your skin, and the hair growth thing was really weird too. So yeah, those are pretty much the reasons why I quit smoking weed, but there are a couple of other things that I do want to discuss and maybe have an open dialogue in the comments about if you want. One of the first things I want to talk about is how weed affects people differently. For me, like I explained earlier, it kind of changed over the course of time. But I remember I had a friend from New Zealand come and visit me, and she was like, oh my god, everyone in California smokes weed. She's like, I feel like I don't fit in. I just really wish I could smoke weed. And I was like, why can't you smoke weed? And she's like, it does not work out with me. She's like, I have tried it even in New Zealand. She's like, I've tried it in edibles, I've tried it in teas, I've tried it in so many different things, and it just affects my body so differently. But she was like, I really want to be able to just smoke weed and hang out with everybody in California. And to me, I was like, that's crazy that you feel a pressure to smoke weed being in the state of California. Like, that is that's different to me. But anywho, she was like, will you help me? And I said, of course, because I was a huge smoker whenever she came to visit me. And I was like, well, maybe we'll start off with different things. Like we can smoke, like you can have one puff of like a joint, or you can have a little bit of like an edible or something. So we would try different things, and oh my God. I remember we had gone to lunch, and we had just had an amazing lunch. She's like, okay, let's try it. I said, okay, we can try it if you want. And we were gonna go get like tea after our lunch. And she had a little bit of an edible. Like, I mean, you guys, it was the size of a piece of gum, okay? But it was not potent. It wasn't something that was like gonna knock you out, but the way that it affected her, she couldn't even get out of the car. She was like, I am so high right now that I can't even move. And she was shaking, and it was just, I had never seen anyone react to weed that way. But everybody's bodies are different. And that's what kind of makes me think about what I'm putting into my body and why it affects people so differently. Your consciousness with yourself is basically everything that you give your body, whether it's how you think about yourself, whether it's the food that you eat, whether it's the community or the environment you are in. All of that affects your consciousness and your spirituality. For example, let's just say, for example, hear me out here. Sugar. Sugar is something that we put into our bodies. There's a good type of sugar and there's a bad type of sugar. Fruit is a good sugar. And then you have, like, I don't know, we can just say candy type of sugar, like a processed, man-made type of sugar. Well, you can obviously have too much fruit. I've eaten too much fruit before, and I've had to actually go to the doctor because I had too much fruit. And then you can also have too much sugar. Everything is about moderation and balance in your body. So if you're smoking weed and putting smoke into your lungs and doing something to your body habitually every single day, just like somebody who eats sugar every single day, it is eventually going to affect your body. And that's just a fact. And it could literally be anything. Same with coffee or caffeine. If you drink caffeine every single day, you are going to create a habit, and it's going to affect your body. And I feel like with weed, that is kind of what people are missing about it. So anyway, it can definitely affect every single person differently. And for me, I always would think, oh, no, I'm okay to drive. I'm okay to do this. But because it affects people differently, I'm not sure how our society should put regulations on smoking weed. So for instance, if somebody like my friend from New Zealand was like, I want to smoke weed so bad because I feel the pressure to smoke weed, or whatever reason it is, like a person like my friend from New Zealand decides to smoke, and she's physically impaired because she decided to smoke, but she's also not in a good mental capacity since she's physically impaired. What if that person decides to drive? So that's one thing I've been thinking about since quitting, is regardless of you feeling like you're sober or you're all there enough to operate a vehicle, work with children, as in like drive a school bus or operate heavy machinery at a construction site or whatever, you are putting other people at risk regardless, because you're not at your highest state of soberness or highest level of consciousness, because your mind is altered. And a lot of people may argue that, you know, weed helps me clean, it helps me stay focused, it helps me do all of these things. But I was looking up videos on YouTube about the study of effects of marijuana on your brain, and scientists have actually found there's a strong link between weed smoking and psychosis, meaning weed can actually induce more mental disorders such as anxiety and depression. People might think it helps them because of how the drug is affecting their brain, but it actually has been proven to make it worse. So I feel like I personally was experiencing that when I was smoking weed. I stopped smoking weed in February, and it's the end of April, so about like 3-ish months now. February, March, April, yeah. It's been about 3 months, and I honestly don't crave smoking weed. I don't want to smoke weed. whatever the case may be. But I will say that I did smoke weed once. It was in the beginning of April, and I wanted to see how it affected my body, so I did it. I smoked weed out of a bong, and once I did that, it was not the same feeling as what I used to get whenever I did smoke weed regularly. I actually became incoherent. I couldn't keep my eyes open. I wanted the feeling of being high to go away. I felt like my body was shaking nervously. I was uncomfortable, and to top it all off, I was social. I was like around other human beings. So it was one of those experiences where I was like, I made the decision to smoke weed again. And I knew from that moment on that I was not going to smoke weed ever again, because if your body reacts to something like that and you are not coherent, how is that ever a good time? I don't understand. I don't understand why I ever thought that was a good time, but it's not a good time. I feel like now I listen to my body with my intuition. I listen to my intuition way more than I ever have in this moment in my life. So if something doesn't make my body feel good, it's not for me. And I really have to listen to that. So I now know that smoking weed is not for me. As far as edibles and stuff like that goes, I may at one point have an edible or something, but it's not something that I'm like, oh, I need to have an edible, you know? I want to talk about, you know, people who feel like they need weed and people who say that they don't have an addiction to weed. I will say that weed, the drug, is not addicting itself. What I will say is your ritual or your habit on however you consume weed is what makes you addicted. And if you ever feel like you need something in order to function, that is an addiction. So if you feel like you need weed to calm down, if you feel like you need weed to reduce your appetite, or if you feel like you need something, that is a codependency, meaning you are depending on an object to get you to something. And I am somebody that believes in holistic healing. I'm not saying I'm against pharmaceutical drugs, because I think there's a place for science and I think that there's a place for pharmaceutical drugs. But as far as marijuana goes, I would say it is plant-based and it's probably one of the safest drugs that you can do. But you have to recognize your habits and behaviors around the drug itself. If you're going to use marijuana recreationally, I think you have to really be responsible about using it. And if you're going to use it medicinally, the same thing goes. If you are using a pharmaceutical drug, you don't take like 30 Xanax in one sitting. And I feel like with a lot of people, they smoke like 30 blunts in one sitting, and that's probably not the best choice for your body. But everyone's different, everyone has their own way of life, and if you want to live the best life, if you want to live at your highest vibration, at your highest level of consciousness, you've got to start thinking about what will get you to that. And I feel like with me personally, smoking weed all this time actually pushed me away from doing the things that I wanted to do without realizing it. And now that I don't smoke weed, I am doing things, I am being productive, and I'm really taking action of my life. So I personally think that me not smoking weed has improved my life tremendously, and I don't want to smoke weed ever again. So I'm going to continue living in my highest level of consciousness. And if you are struggling with quitting and you don't know how to quit, there are so many sources online that you can find to help you quit smoking. And if you ever just need someone to talk to, feel free to message me or, you know, leave a comment and we can discuss some things. But I have been pretty much all over the place with this video. I didn't really know how this was going to go. I just wanted to open up the floor and tell you guys of my experience with smoking weed. And thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye, guys.